Hi guys, my name is Timo Maas and you're listening to the Liverpool Connection podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Liverpool Connection podcast. I'm your host, Daz. This is my music and football episode where I bring on a guest, usually to talk about music and football. But seeing as it's my podcast, I can do what I want. So lately, I've been bringing on musicians just to talk about their roots and influences and journey so far in this crazy world. My next guest is a DJ producer, writer, visual artist, broadcaster, and probably one of the best dressed men in the music scene. I think so. He's got a style of his own, and it's brilliant. It's the great Justin Robertson. Welcome to the pod, mate. I cannot wait to
Uh,
get started.
Thank you so much. It was a lovely intro, and I'm looking a bit casual today because it's heating's not up to much, so I'm kind of got my cardi on to keep myself cozy in this
Well,
conversation.
how many hats do you have? How many hats do you own?
Quite a lot, and they're almost all the sort of variations on the theme. So I've got lots of berets, lots of kind of watch caps, and a few eight pieces. I don't know, too many. We were discussing before we started your excellent trainer collection and how the collector spirit takes you over sometimes. You can sort of lose track, really. But I'm a great believer in having variations on if it works, like why not just have variations, different times, different atmospheric conditions, different weather.
Hmm.
You need to be ready for different eventualities. Got to go match your hat with your cardi or not, So a few I haven't counted. Not too many. I moved in July, so I thinned out the collection a little bit, but
Well, I mean,
enough.
well, you got to have one for every day, and like you said, one for each outfit. It's always good. It's like a good pair of shoes. You know,
Exactly.
if you like them, you'll get three pairs of the same one, but just in different colors. So you've got every base covered. Um, I cannot wait, like I said, to get into this and your roots and influences. So
Mm.
back when you're a kid in your house. What kind of music was coming out the stereo from your mum and dad?
Well, my journey of life has taken a particularly strange turn of late. So as I said just now, I moved in July, and I've moved back to the estate I was born on, which is quite a strange, not deliberately, by sheer coincidence. I've bought a house on an estate in Shepperton called the Manygate Lane Estate, and it's where I was born. Uh, and I was born in 1968. And kind of spent the first few. Well, I moved from Shepperton when I was really, really young. Like really young. I don't really remember it. And then I moved to sort of place called Chalmers St Peter in the home counties, and lived there until I moved to Manchester in the late '80s. So, and my parents were. I was what do you call it? An autumn crocus. They were quite old when I was born, and my dad was in the war. He was in the RAF. And neither of them were particularly into music, to be honest. So the background, my mum would always have Radio 2 on, so we'd have sort of Terry Wogan and kind of stuff like that in the background. And my real introduction to music, alternative music, was my dad. Both my parents were married before, so I had two half brothers, and one brother in particular, John, who would come and visit every month or so, and he's a little bit older than me, and he would always come with records. And I was really excited about his arrival because he'd bring culture with him to the backwaters of Buckinghamshire, which weren't particularly known, weren't a hotbed of alternative culture, as you can probably imagine. Um, so initially, I think it was probably kind of a variety of rock things, and then there was kind of because I was in a small town, the only record shop, it wasn't really a record shop, was a newsagent that sold records called NSS. And so I'd just buy anything like that I could get my hands on. I didn't really know what I was buying. I'd sort of go by how long the hair was or how weird the cover looked. Or so there was a few false starts, but I was just picking up, all sorts of stuff from kind of from Saxon to Elvis Costello. It was kind of ridiculous. But it was my older brother really who sort of guided me. Initially, it was kind of rock stuff, and then I kind of morphed myself into sort of a space rock thing like Hawkwind and Tangerine Dream and stuff like that, which I still like. It's a real bedrock of the sort of music I like. And then as he got older, he was getting into stuff like the Velvet Underground and the Fall and stuff like that, and also sort of smatterings of dub. And by that stage, I'd kind of progressed on to finding my own things, and like a lot of people of our age, John Peel, obviously. So it wasn't really, I didn't really absorb music from my parents at all, and they were kind of quite bemused by. We had one of those old-fashioned radiograms, those massive wood bits of furniture, and I used to take that over and just initially play my records, so they were just like shell shocked. But we sort of like drinks parties when all the neighbours would come round at Christmas and stuff like that, and I'd be sort of whacking on like Black Sabbath records or something like that, much to their annoyance. But they were kind of fairly bemused by it all, really. I mean, my dad sort of quite liked a few bits and pieces, and when I started making music, they're both passed away sadly now, but I don't think they ever really understood what it was I did and how you could possibly, make a career out of music, if you call it a career, if you could have employed in the music world. So it wasn't really for them. It's mainly my older brother where I got it from initially.
Were you a top of the pops family? Because obviously, every family, like growing up for me, every what was it, Thursday nights, I think was top.
Yeah, I think so.
Every,
I was never really that into it. I was kind of like, I think from quite an early age, I took the kind of contrarian position, So, oh no, it's all commercial sellout music. I'm not interested in that sort of stuff. But then, there was always a few bands on I liked, so I did find myself tuning in. I mean, I really remember like very early kind of music and TV incidents. I remember watching the Sex Pistols when they the Grundy kind of the infamous interview, and I remember seeing that as a kid. I was probably too young to really appreciate what was going on, and fair play to my parents, they didn't turn it off, and they were just kind of a sort of scowl and tut. But they were quite permissive, really. I mean, when I started growing my hair and where walking around, I spent one weekend walking around High Wycombe without any shoes on because I thought I was part of the counterculture. So and my mum was very sort of indulgent of these sort of things. I don't know why, but she was just like, just they used to tut at me really more a lot and kind of shake their heads and be puzzled how they'd managed to bring up this strange entity in their midst.
I mean, for me, I used to watch Top of the Pops because it was just more novelty. You look back in the 70s as we were kids growing up, and it was all daft music that was on Combine Harvester, stuff like that. You just like,
Yeah.
what is this? And
Yeah.
your mum and dad are tapping away, and you're just like, this is god awful, but you fell for it. Every Thursday night you'd get in front of the telly, as you get a little bit older, a shandy, cucumber sandwich if you spreading the wealth. Yeah. So but it was just all a bit silly. And then I saw Buzzcocks, and I was like, what is this? And I want some more of it.
Yeah.
Because when you get to that certain age, especially a young teenager, you want something completely different from the norm, from what your mum and dad have been listening to. I mean, my sister was more, synth pop, which I like, Depeche
Yeah,
Mode,
yeah,
League, Joy Division, but I still wanted something that kind of lyrically threw something at me that
yeah.
meant something to me. And for yourself, was it more lyrical?
Um, I think it's, I don't know, it kind of, I've always had really broad tastes, and I think it depends on what sort of mood I'm in or like what environment I'm in. A bit like the hats, really, I guess. But it's so I lived in it's what you might call the liminal space between urban and and rural. It was suburbia, classic suburbia, and there was like a little woodland, um, basically between a dual carriageway and a bypass. But to me, it was quite pastoral. So sometimes I'd sort of get into music that I felt sort of reflected that, and then maybe the kind of radically tedious place that I got into sort of quite escapist music. So that's why I'd be into the sort of space rock stuff and the sort of Tangerine Dream things where you'd kind of be able to drift off and take yourself away from it. And in the same way, I suppose I was listening to a lot of quite urban music um, later on, kind of post-punk sort of stuff. And again, it was sort of hankering to be somewhere else and hankering to sort of live a different sort of life that I had no at that stage had absolutely no idea what it might look like. I thought it was quite sophisticated. I used to go to London quite a lot, buy records and go to gigs and stuff. But I was really, when I moved to Manchester, I suddenly realised how naive I was, and suddenly you see the sort of a completely different world and you're sort of thrown into it. But yeah, the music sort of moved in lockstep with that, really, depending on my sort of mood, and it's still very much like that. I'm quite hard to pin down on. I don't. There's like a sort of psychedelic thread that runs through all the stuff I like, but I couldn't really. Maybe that's kind of growing up in a place where magic mushrooms were plentiful. I don't know if if that had anything to do with it. The sort of suburban psychedelia, I guess. And I live quite near High Wycombe, which is a massive psychedelia scene. So I don't really know. It was anything to sort of escape the kind of uh, suburban bondage that I found myself in. Even though I've moved, I'm glad to have moved back to it now. I'm older.
So Manchester is, basically where you spread your wings. Like, were you DJing before you moved?
No, and so I moved in 1986, um, and I'd sort of heard smatterings of electronic records. I remember like getting an Enemy free single that they gave away, and it had a Mantronics track on there called Hardcore Hip Hop. And then I used to listen to a lot of kind of Cabaret Voltaire and things like that, kind of electronic tinge stuff. So I was sort of vaguely aware of it. Obviously, house records were in the charts as well, so I kind of knew that music a little bit. But I thought, so I had quite a lot of records when I had to study philosophy, so I was a student. So I had quite a lot of records when I got up there, and I ended up sort of playing them at student parties from almost as soon as I got there. But in terms of it being something that you'd want to be, um, it wasn't an obvious career path. Let's put it that way. And in fact, I didn't really know much about it. In the first week I got to Manchester, I met this guy called Eddie Leverton, who's a little bit older than me, and he'd gone to Nottingham University, and he's from Leeds, so he knew about all sort of. He was going to hear Graham Park at the garage, and he was going to the warehouse in Leeds, so he kind of introduced me to a lot of that very early Chicago house stuff. We were sort of swapping records and playing stuff, and then we started going out initially to sort of places which played a real mixture of stuff in Manchester at the time. So it'd be bits of go, some indie stuff, and sort of early house. And as soon as I heard that music, it was really like the road to Damascus moment. I was like, what is this stuff? It sort of sounded a little bit like some of the weird electronic German stuff that I liked but it was like formless and kind of relentless and proper sort of alien machine music, and it really captured my imagination. I just thought, this is fantastic, and that kind of in lockstep of being moving away from home and sort of finding yourself and experimenting in various different forms of stimulation. So it all sort of came together. It was quite confusing for a few months. I remember like not really knowing what I was or what I was doing. I had no money either, so I was kind of dressed in this like really weird combination of outfits, and it took me a while to sort of get my head around what was going on. And I guess even then, like DJing wasn't really. I mean, DJing then is probably in its purest form. What attracts me to dance music is that I always use the phrase a reluctant exhibitionist. So you're basically sharing your taste with people, but at that stage, no one knew where you were or who you were, and no one really cared. It was just you were playing, you were letting the music speak. You were like becoming a conduit for records, so records could speak, and it was the music that you were hearing. And I thought, well, this is perfect for me because, um, you know, at parties I always ended up by the hi-fi playing records and not talking to anybody. So I thought, well, great, I could make a career out of this. It'd be brilliant. I could just, I didn't even know you could do such a thing. I'll play the records I like to people, and then I could do that all night. That'd be great. I wasn't really concerned about it being. Didn't really. It's not like it. It's not like. I mean, I was in bands at school, and always found being on stage quite excruciating. And then later on, when we were doing Lionrock, I still found it excruciating. So I thought DJing was quite a good thing because you sort of share music, but you didn't have to be on stage. So that's why I quite like it.
Background back then as well. The DJ wasn't like shoved on a stage in front of
No,
everyone. They were usually, up higher or like, behind everything. So, and everybody wasn't staring at the DJ like they do
no.
now.
Yeah, I don't know when that changed. I mean, even quite far into the 90s, it was still like that. I remember sort of doing, the back room of Cream. You would sort of be on the DJ booth was on the dance floor, and people sort of on podiums dancing with each other, towards each other. Even then, I don't know when the great switch around came. Yeah, maybe it's the putting DJs on stages was a terrible idea, I thought, but I mean, that's still what I find interesting about electronic music, and I think that's why the music press initially found it quite difficult to deal with because it was the cliche faceless techno bollocks, because they couldn't find a sort of a face for it, and they couldn't find a manifesto for it. It was just happening, and it's blooming out into lots of different genres and different styles, and just capturing people's imagination from loads of different walks of life. And I think a lot of people just in the kind of music criticism world found it really hard to get their head around because it was so strange, and it had a completely new set of. That's Harry. Harry, shh, there's a cat who lives next door. He's just letting himself be known. I'm doing an interview now. You stop barking. What was I saying? Yeah, so because it was predominantly about the records, about the music and sharing it, and then making sort of new patterns out of records, and using music in a different way that wasn't about going on stage and performing and preening and kind of that kind of quite macho sort of rock performance. And it wasn't even a art school kind of punk thing either. It was like a truly, without trying to sound too cosmic about it, but it was a truly communal experience. And the DJ was like part of it, but like part of a circuit. And I don't know when it happened, but the idea of the superstar DJ was a terrible terrible thing. I think that was where it all started going downhill.
I think most DJ booths I remember had locked doors. So you were the only, if you wanted your mate in there or something, that's it, two people, not 200 people like there are now. I just don't understand that. It's like there's a party away from the actual party, and you're segregating, like, oh, these are the VIP people, the more important people. These are just paying punters. I don't like that at all. I wish it would.
No.
I mean,
I think the locked door, the locked DJ booth door was invented to keep idiots like me out, because when I worked at when I was working at Eastern Bloc Records. So when I finished university, I got a job, and I had a few different jobs. Before I went to university, I was working in a graveyard, and then which I liked very much. I have a strong affinity with graveyards. And then I worked in a medical records office, which was also quite depressing. And then I worked at Eastern Bloc Records. They do, yes. That's the preliminary to the graveyard. So I was following the whole process, really. But and then I ended up working at Eastern Bloc Records almost as soon as I'd finished university. So and we were serving all the kind of DJs at the time, Steve Williams, Mike Pickering, Graham Park, Sasha, John Da Silva, like all the kind of Manchester DJs, people from Liverpool, all sorts, whole community there, and which was brilliant for me as a kind of hoarder record collector, because the boxes would open, you'd be like, it's like all these excellent records. So that was brilliant. But it also meant that if I was at somewhere like the Hacienda and a DJ played a record I didn't know, from the record shop, and I was like, it was like a throwing down the gauntlet. So I would sort of run up the stairs, bang on the door, and then I remember, like, Mike Pickering used to play this Lime record called On the Grid, that he was like a big New York kind of disco proto electronic kind of record, and I always used to love it. And John Da Silva playing Virgo Mechanically Replayed. I remember those two records particularly, and I didn't know what they were at all. So I used to sort of run upstairs, bang on the door, and you could feel this anticipation. Oh my god! I opened the door, like, yes, what do you? But of course, by the time I got there, it finished. So I was trying to explain to them what it was, and there was just that. See you later, Justin. See you in the shop. Bye. And I think that's why the locked door was was there to stop idiots like me, really.
Well, Dave Haslam kind of told me a story. He used to play at Hacienda, and he just kept the door locked because there was just too many weirdos that wanted to be in the booth with him. And then sometimes the promoter didn't like what he played,
right?
But he couldn't get in.
No.
So kept the door locked. I was like, that's very smart. You keep
it's a good
what you're doing. So,
but the thing is, a trick I found was that in the Hacienda they had the lighting people next door, so I befriended them, and I could get into the lighting bit. There was like a hatch between the two, and I could put my head through the hatch. And you can't get me yet. Can't get rid of me now. And then eventually I ended up on the other side. Harry, this may happen. You may punctuate our interview with announcements. Look, Harry. Shush. My neighbour's coming home from work. So yeah, it was what were we talking about? Yes, doors. I mean, the DJ booth, and I always like the ones that were quite low down, and so you're kind of on the dance floor. And I still think that's the best way of being. I don't think being on the stage. I never do anything of interest that anyone would want me to. There's nothing interesting going on. Why would you want to look at me? That's it, man. I don't really see it. But also I'm 57 now, so I think it's not really incumbent on me to judge the younger generation and how they choose to enjoy themselves. I think it's like fair enough, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm I try and not hop back to, like, back in my day and stuff, but the only thing that does annoy me is the mobile phones, because I think you lose the soul of the night. I've always said it, dance music, it's in there, dance. And a lot of people don't seem to be dancing anymore. Yeah, you know, it is their time. I can't be that grumpy old fart, you know, that says you've got to do it this way, you know.
Yeah, I think in that particular instance, there's two distinct ways of looking at that really, and I think when we were going out when Acid House first started, there weren't any obviously there weren't smartphones and there were cameras, but if you saw someone filming or taking photographs, you either thought they were old Bill and it was a police raid because they often when they did a raid they often had brought cameras and filmed everybody, or maybe it was someone from The Face was doing an article on clubbing or something like that. But generally, you'd be suspicious of anyone who was taking photographs of you because you're out of your mind. And your face would be all over the place. And it wasn't a very attractive sight. So you were just thinking like, God, I hope no one films this or takes a photo. I mean, there are a few photos from that time. And I've got a couple of photographs, but it was very much like you're too busy having a good time to be worrying about capturing it like that. But on the other hand, I can also understand the urge to preserve a memory as well. So I'm not. I agree with you. Sometimes it's a bit disconcerting seeing a sea of phones and people filming rather than dancing. However, you know, there is an aspect of capturing a moment, but maybe you should just capture the moment and put your phone away and then crack on. But I don't know. Yeah, I've mixed emotions about it. Mixed emotions about the capturing every single moment. I think a certain amount of mystery is always welcome, really.
So when you're working at Eastern Bloc, is that when you started to, you know, develop your DJ skills and start to go, you know, maybe there is something in this after all?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had a kind of quite chaotic Discordian approach to life in general, so I never plan anything out. So it was just a series of coincidences and lucky happenstance, really. I mean, the thing about working in the shop was that you were meeting a lot of the promoters and other DJs and stuff, and there was a sort of mixture between youthful enthusiasm, bravado, and utter bullshit that I kind of employed to get myself work really. So, I mean, if I remember the first, I think I warmed up for Mike Pickering at this do once, and I had obviously had the records, was buying the records, but I'm still getting in front of the decks. I have no fucking idea what I'm doing. There's like two techniques before I even had decks. I think I just didn't really know what to do. Kind of like they sort of muddled through. And then sort of I did get some decks, and I managed to sort of work out what I was doing. And the same with like promoters. Uh, all the conspiracy guys would come into the shop a lot and hang out, and so they sort of offered me work there. I met Greg Fenton. We started Spice, our Sunday night thing up, a more sort of Balearic kind of vibe. Um, and so you could promote your parties yourself. And it started off just doing things for your friends. I mean, when I was a student as well, me and Eddie used to put on parties, basically just for our mates. We'd hire out a venue and then make up flyers and hand them out at clubs around town or outside the university or whatnot. So it was a bit quite very DIY kind of thing then. I mean, totally different world though. It's almost impossible to sort of put your head back in that time. It was all very seat your pants, and you didn't really think it. You weren't really sure how long it was going to last. You didn't really care. You weren't thinking about uh, the history. I mean, the last thing you think of is in the year 2025 that I'd be talking about it to anyone, or there would be people would be collecting flyers from that stage. It was just like, oh, do this for a few months and see what happens. We didn't. I don't think that anyone saw it as being. I knew it was revolutionary. It felt revolutionary. It felt really new and exciting, but you didn't know how long it was going to last. You thought it might be a flash in a pan, like a couple of months or something, 18 months, a couple of years. And I'm a surprised to the next person that it's still going. But there you go. But that shows the kind of elastic nature of electronic music. It's hard to sort of it's hard to it's not like punk that had this sort of raw rock and roll backbeat and then it turned into new wave and post punk, and then morphed into something else. Electronic music kind of exploded in lots of different directions immediately because it was so versatile. You could attach it to different vehicles. You know, the rock bands started using break beats, or old disco records were revamped, and then people sped them up, and drum and bass was born, you know, and we all slowed it down, and you know, it's just like the genres exploded instantly because it was sort of so formless, and it didn't have a kind of hard and fast set of rules to it. So I really answered your question. What was the question? How did I? Yeah, so working in the shop again. Talking of kind of chaotic incidents, I mean, my whole recording career, if you want to call it that, I hate using the word career. My recording happenings started because I was working Eastern Bloc, and they had a label called Creed, I think it was, and they had a band that was signed to the label called the Mad Jacks, and it was just a time when sort of people started to get remixes done. You know, Primal Scream was happening, Happy Mondays and stuff like that. This is all in the midst of Manchester was happening all around us, though we didn't really realise it at the time. And they said, "Well, let's get a remix of the Mad Jacks, but who could do it?" And I said, "I'll do it." And John Berry around, it was like, "Okay." If I'd never been in the studio before, I didn't know anything about studios at all, but there was a place called Out of the Blue, and a brilliant engineer called Mark Stagg, and he kind of held my hand through those early remixes, and I sort of knew what I wanted it to sound like, and I had an idea of some of the kind of drum breaks I was going to use and some of the kind of feel of it. And then, yeah, it kind of came out quite well. And these it just sort of took off from there, totally unplanned. And I didn't really know what I was doing, you know. It was, but I don't think anyone did. It was all very experimental. I mean, the whole of acid house is built on happy mistakes, isn't it? Really, you know, like the 303 is a not very convincing bassline machine that was misused by some guys in Chicago, and hey presto, acid house was born by sort of a series of happy accidents. So, you know, I think that's the best way of. I think sometimes you could kind of have this story that like human geniuses repurpose things to create this new idea they have, and that's the fact. It's a bit works in a kind of to and fro between the machine and the person. That sort of mismatch, and kind of when these things collide and people make mistakes and don't know what they're doing or try things out, that's when all the magic happens, because it's just complete chaos. And then years later, people will do interviews and go like, "Well, of course I was toying with this idea of an entirely new genre of music." Well, I think a lot of it's just complete accident, and luckily, it's the same with a lot of things. I mean, I suppose even in the kind of drugs that we took, they're repurposed chemical formula developed for some other reason that ended up being quite fun. So, you know, I don't think the people who developed ecstasy or LSD and things like that were really thinking it would end up quite as it did. But here we are.
Well, I think the DIY aspect of the scene, where it was, you know, we can all make our own music, that we can also go, you know, to a pub or a abandoned building and make a night of it. And I think that's what I loved as well. You know, it was against the establishment. Obviously, the Northwest was just trodden on by Thatcherism. You know, they beat us down so much. I mean, especially Liverpool, that you know we'd had enough of it, and you know we were like, we're not going to stand for what you believe in. And I mean, even like I listened back to an interview by the great Andy Weatherall, saying like when they brought Marshall Jefferson to London for the first time for a house night, it bombed. But then, you know, you went up north to Hacienda, and Acid House was just in every club you can ever expect, a pub, club, you know, and that's that's the thing that I grew up on and loved about it. It was a big, fuck you
Yeah.
to the government.
I mean, I remember I did an interview a few years ago, and I used to think it can be slightly misunderstood. I always thought that one of the things that was attractive about acid house is it wasn't political in the sense that it wasn't attached to a particular set of incidents, like say the hippies in the Vietnam War or something like that. However, it was. I remember some guys from the Blackburn Raves who said, "Oh no, we really were conscious. It was a conscious political act for those exact reasons that you said. That the Northwest had suffered so much over years of Thatcherism and the kind of trickle down economics that it was a conscious reaction to it. And I think elsewhere in the country, it was a conscious and unconscious reaction to that kind of idea of selfishness, everyone for themselves, that kind of like awful, sort of almost neo-Darwinist kind of misreading of Darwin, the survival of the fittest kind of stuff. And it was a reaction to that, consciously and unconsciously. So in that sense, it was a political act. There's a philosopher, Jack Rancio, talks about what is politics, and politics is the arena where we all get together and find out how we can live together. So I guess it's in the song titles. How let's all get together. That is the essence of politics. Really, that's Harry, Harry on TV. It's a way of trying to find out how we can live together. So I think in that sense it was very political. In that broad sense, it wasn't like a party political, though again in later years it did become that, because you have things like the criminal justice bill, and so it did become more overtly political as the authorities tried to stop it. But yeah, it was a real reaction to the kind of prevailing culture of the time, I guess. That's what made it so revolutionary. And I suppose punk was as well, but I think it's much more revolutionary than punk. I mean, I don't ever quite buy that cycle of revolution, because dance music, you can take its lineage right back to the dawn of time, but there's always been a certain idea of liberation and freedom to it, where people get together and escape the kind of as Andrew would call it, transcendence. You're trying to escape the difficulties of life, and dancing together is the perfect way of doing that. And I suppose it was harnessing that energy, really. So it's kind of ancient and modern at the same time.
Well, it's very tribalistic. You're in a room listening to beats, and everyone's on their different levels, but it's still very tribal, very trance inducive. And it was a time that just opened my eyes, because for me it wasn't just the music. I started to read more.
Mm.
Read more, philosophical books. I wanted to know more about life.
Mm-hmm.
Like at the after party, I'd be the lad like looking through people's books, like
Yeah.
just because I was in the zone. I mean, obviously, yeah, the drugs were good back then, and you still be awake, and sometimes the music at that after party was an afterthought, and it was more about conversations with people. And for me, it was books. I'd have a good conversation with people, whether they liked it or not. I'd talk their ear off. Those were the good old days.
Yeah. I only wanted you to skin up. Don't ever to start talking about Kafka.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, oh, come on, just pass the joint.
Yeah.
So for talking about Lionrock, and then
Yeah.
going back to Top of the Pops, you get to be on Top of the Pops. I mean, that's got to
Yeah.
be surreal, because obviously you've also said you don't like to be in the spotlight. So
Yeah.
what better to do than get a purple suit
Yeah.
and a gramophone, because I remember it quite well. And
Yeah.
there you are. There's Lionrock, and there's just
Yeah. Well, yeah. The best part of that, well, I remember being quite excited about that because on the show that week was supposed to be Madonna was supposed to be on it. Well, she was on it, but then she was on it like on video link from LA or something like that. Oh, I did meet Shed Seven and the cast from Casualty, who were very nice. And the best part of the day was being shown around the EastEnders set. That was excellent. So we had a little tour of that by one of the cast members whose character I can't remember. But yeah, I mean, it was, I don't know. It was one of those. It's not. Yeah, it's a nice thing to have in your kind of. Oh, I went on top of pop. It's brilliant, but I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like the whole Lionrock thing is. I don't know. I'm sort of mixed emotions about the whole project, really. But had its moments, but I don't know.
do you think it, because you came first out on an independent label, right, before Deconstruction?
Mm.
Wh-
Well put it out ourselves. Really, it was Most Excellent Recordings, and it did really well. And then yeah, through Mike really. Me and Mike Pickering made a proto a proto I don't know you call it now. Well, we collaborated together on the record, which with engineered by Andy Robinson, who's New Order's manager now. I don't know if it happened, never saw the light of day. It involved me and Mike chanting over a kind of tribal beat. It never came out, but he introduced me to Pete Hadfield, and they kind of took again. It was a bit the chaotic thing, really. They took a punt on me because they said, we'll sign everything. Everything was an accident. The whole Lionrock thing. The first single came about because I had some time booked in the studio, and the remix I was supposed to do, the tapes didn't turn up. But I had the studio booked and I had to pay for it. So I thought, well, I'll make something of my own. That's the first thing I'd ever made of my own. I think, yeah, it was. And then I sort of sent it off to my manager. So, well, let's put it out. And then it was literally like, I'm with the cutting engineer, kind of, what do you want to call it? And I had a bag of records with me, and I had an album by Culture called Lionrock. And I was like, Lionrock. I also had in the bag Premarital Yodeling by Sofahead. So we could have been called Premarital Yodeling, but it was called Lionrock. So again, it was chaotic, and then Decon sort of Pete Tong started playing it, I think, and Decon sort of, well, would you want to make a? Do you want to? We'll sign you, and do you want to make an album? And I was like, okay. I'm not quite sure how. I just, it was all like, okay, I'll have a go at that. Be fine. And rather than this sort of honed vision, it was all, I mean, it says a lot. I have a much clearer vision now, but I think it's taken me all like 30 years to sort of to get it.
Mm. So for you, with starting your Most Excellent club nights, and then getting booked for Bugged Out, which
Mm,
was massive, especially for where I'm from. I used to go to Cream all the time. Bugged Out,
mm,
it's absolutely like one of the best nights I've had in my life. It's still, I don't need a mobile phone to remember. So
mm.
for you, is that where the DJing really started to take off, and you started to get really booked?
Um, I can't really remember. To be honest with you, I can't really remember. I was busy out throughout the 90s. Really, it was quite a busy time. And what was nice was because I had sort of quite broad taste, I could do quite different um, clubs. So I could do like the Orbit one weekend or Bugged Out, and then I could do like Back Room of Cream, and then I could play like reggae records in the back in a back room somewhere, or down tempo stuff. And then we used to do this thing called Rebellious Jukebox upstairs at the Paradise Factory. And we're playing all sorts of weird records like Stereo Lab and kind of rock and roll and dub, and just playing all sorts of crazy things. So it was quite an open-minded time. And like I said earlier, it's like all these different genres kept sprouting off, and and taking on a life of their own. So it's quite an experimental era, and I really liked that. I felt really non-genre specific um, throughout the whole 90s, really. So it was quite exciting, um, and yeah, it's quite busy. My main thing is I always really hated the kind of showbiz aspects to it, and I was really bad at bigging myself up. Not that I didn't want people to sort of listen to me or listen to what I was playing, or kind of didn't think it was interesting. It's just more like I was more interested in the cliche. I was like, wanting the people to be interested in the music and the records, not interested in anything that I might have to say about any particular subject. So I never found it really hard to sort of get on board with a lot of that sort of stuff. So I had a reputation of being a bit elusive, I guess, because I just didn't think I don't think I had anything interesting to say really. I was just like enjoying myself and enjoying making music. And also I've always had a kind of healthy cynicism. Not cynicism's the wrong word. Yeah, I kind of I don't know, a satirical take on the whole thing. I find it's all slightly ridiculous. There's sort of layers of gravitas that were attached to DJing. The whole idea, like taking people on a journey and all this sort of stuff, which is true, you do. But it was like you're adding all these layers to something really, you're playing other people's music and sharing music with people. That's what it is. And you just happen to have a lot of records and you're playing them. And the idea that there was sort of some sort of weird headliner or hierarchy where we're all doing the same thing and a lot of the time playing the same records, but somehow there was like the headline DJ. I just thought importing that rockist approach to music and not in all clubs, but in a lot of the clubs I was playing in, I just couldn't get on board with it really. I just thought it was ridiculous. It's an anathema to what acid house was about. But having said that, and it's quite weird how history is often recounted by the people who sort of take control of those kind of the means of production. But all the interesting stuff was happening in like squat parties, free parties, and stuff like that. DIY, and that's where the real countercultural stuff was happening because it was uh, borderless and kind of no hierarchy. Anyone could go, anyone could get involved, for better or for worse. So you might have complete maniacs mixing with all kind of old hippies and stuff like that. But in retrospect, that was what was the most interesting for me because it was not rockist and it wasn't importing the kind of world of rock promotion and using those kind of parameters for electronic music. It was like a free for all kind of thing, which I think was much more, in retrospect, much more interesting.
Well, how do you feel? Because the Chemical Brothers cite you as a mentor. Their Heavenly Social, your rebellious jukebox precursor
Yeah.
to social. How do you feeling? Because they've gone from strength to strength. I mean, people look at them as superstars. And
Yeah.
fair play to, and they've worked their arses off. I actually first, because obviously I live in the States. I was in Orlando when they came over as the Dust Brothers. I saw them for the very first time at a club called The Edge in Orlando. And
I think I DJ'd at that gig.
really,
Yeah.
it was DJ Icy in
Yeah. He ran a very fine chain of fast food stores. DJ
and then
IC.
outside, yeah, a bit. They played with the Basement Twins outside as well.
Right. Maybe it's different to. I think maybe that was his first. Yeah, I think I went. I think that's the second time that they'd played there. I played in Orlando for DJ IC with them. There might have been a Chemical Brothers by then, but early days. But I think my point still holds true with them because I see them quite often until I moved. And me and Ed play badminton together every week, and I often meet up with him. And no one, you know, he can walk down any high street in the country, and no one will go like pointing at him. You know, it's not like I don't know. He's not a rock star in that sense. In that sense, they're the quintessential acid house group, because you go to their gigs, and even though they're on stage and they're behind all their gear, you can't really see them, and it's all the kind of it's the sheer intensity of the visuals and the music that takes you away. In that case, you're looking at the stage because it's so enthralling, but you're not kind of looking at them. So in that sense, they're quintessentially acid house for me. But they're not. They've let the machines. You're listening to machines speaking. That's what it is for me, and the visual elements with it. So I think they harnessed that, and I think throughout their career, they've been given. A lot of people have tried to send them more in that direction. Like I've had people suggesting they have like more musicians on stage with them, or they have to do this, that, and the other. And they've always resisted it, and hence why, and correctly so, because it becomes, like I say, it's a pure acid house experience for me.
For you know, you being in the studio, especially with Dead Stock 33s, when especially when you're remixing as well, like how do you get in, not inspired, but to do something different from what the original is? Because you know you do listen to there's thousands, millions of house music records out there, dub, reggae, and the remixes all sound exactly the same. But I just feel with Dead Stock 33s, it's completely different. Like you put it on, you turn it around, throw it up in the air, see what comes back down.
Yeah,
like,
that's pretty much it. Yeah,
yes.
that's exactly what I do. But so I mean, the Dead Stock 33s. So yeah, going back to Lionrock, and then that kind of end of that neatly bookended the millennium for me. It was like, right, the year 2000. I don't want to do that anymore. We'll do something new. But then, like the first few years of the 2000s, I think I was quite directionless. I didn't really know. There's lots of different. There was a new vitality to dance music, and I couldn't quite. I felt like maybe a little bit outside it all, really. You know, that kind of, what's the word, like sort of electro clash kind of sound, and the sort of noisy techno stuff, which I quite liked some of it, but I didn't feel like I was part of it, and I felt a bit directionless. And then I remember sort of listening to a lot of, sort of going back to the roots a bit, like listening to sort of records that sounded like they were made in 1986, 87. And then people like Inflagranti and people like that, who are like the really sort of psychedelic end of disco. And there's sort of something about that rawness that I suddenly reacquainted myself with, and it was sort of suited me, because you know, I started working on my own, so I was just doing everything at home. Stopped using kind of fancy studios, and just doing, but went really back to basics, and was just working away on my own, experimenting. And it took a few false starts, but I like that kind of raw, stripped down, primitive kind of sound with a bit of a slight live feel to it, but almost sort of a naive quality to it. So I guess so I started to exploring that, really, and again it goes back to the dub stuff that I liked when I was younger and still do. It's stripped back, so you can hear there's kind of a lot of room for things to breathe. And in terms of remixes, I've always thought that the job of a remix is to add a new perspective to something, like not to improve it, not to you know, do a dance version of something else. It's more like add your perspective on something, like whatever that might be. It might be taking the entire song, or it might be just taking one element from it, or it might be just the feel of it, you know, to complement it, and to sort of just add another perspective to it, rather than fit to a formula, which sometimes gets you in all sorts of trouble, and sometimes you just get angry A&R people or angry members of bands going, "What have you done to my records?" Which I've had on a number of occasions. I had quite recently, in fact. So, but it's never meant as a sort of disrespectful thing. I wouldn't do something that I didn't first think I could do something with or add a different point of view to. I wouldn't. Oh, that's not true. Actually, I have done things that have been really skinned, but generally speaking, I try and be discerning and think, oh, well, I could do something with this and add something to it. Because, like you say, you don't, those packages where you've got 8,000 remixes. I mean, it doesn't happen so much now, but you remember in the 90s, you get the sort of quadruple pack with like something for everyone, and I was just a bit like, oh my god, this is like a marketing nightmare. So I think that's how I approach things. Really, it's like what can I add? What can I add to it to make it interesting, but not necessarily try and supersede it in any particular way, or just satisfy a marketing niche. That's why everything goes wrong for me. I wish I did. I should listen to that. I wish I knew a bit more about marketing, but I don't.
Well, how daunting is it then for, again, I'll say the great Andrew Weatherall, you've remixed him to get that approval, because it doesn't matter if, I'm just we're all music listeners, whether you're a top DJ, producer, or I sit in my bedroom and listen to Andrew Weatherall. I mean, I would think getting feedback from him is just like, the heavens open, like, ah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
again, how do you approach that? Getting that on your doorstep.
What you mean, seeking the opinions of people I admire?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. It's really satisfying, because I think that's I think you make me lots of different reasons for making music. Part of it is sharing, and then people you think you have a common vision that you share. If they approve, it's also a good validation. So you realize you're not necessarily gone completely insane. And don't get me wrong. There have been times where I've said things to people and they've gone like, "What the hell is this?" So mistakes happen. They don't tend to come out. One day I'll release all my mistakes, the greatest mistakes record. But yeah, it's lovely, and there's a really nice kind of circuit of people sharing music. And me and Sean Johnson share music all the time. It's continuing Andrew's legacy because again, it's a very similar outlook on music and a similar ethos. What that ethos is quite hard to pin down. I wouldn't be able to tell you what it is, but there's a kind of thread that runs through all these sort of things, I guess. So yeah, it's always really heartening. And if you do a remix for somebody, I just did a remix for Andy Bell, whose work I really admire, and he really liked it. So it was, that was like I spent a good day feeling good about things. So it's lovely, yeah, it's lovely, and also people generally liking it. But then on the other hand, not everyone's going to like what you do, and I always seem to make music that's a little bit, especially in recent years. Some things have been accidentally popular, but most of the time I make things that are a little bit unlikely to trouble the charts. So you're going to get lots of furrow brows and people, shaking their heads in disbelief. But that's fine. That's what I'm pleased with that reaction also.
Make people think a bit more. What inspires you, Justin?
Many things inspire me. I subscribe to a kind of Discordian point of view. So chaos, quite happenstance, luck. I find quite inspiring. I find decentering humanity quite inspiring. I'm quite a fan of what a pretentious philosophical movement called object-orientated ontology, which is basically a way of looking at the world that decenters the human experience and considers how other objects might interact with each other. And I think that's what I find, again, going back to calling myself a reluctant exhibitionist. What I think is interesting about DJing and electronic music, or music in general, is you're hearing music. It's like the voice of an entity, music, or writing a book, a novel. Even though my name's on the front of it, sometimes you think, like, I don't know how much I had to do with that. You're like, it's like an act of possession, where something from outside you takes possession of you, and you're like a conduit. So that kind of outlook on life is very influential to me. And occult stuff, and I don't mean, witches and broomsticks and devils, though that also interests me, but just the unknown, and how little we know, and how we always scratch the surface of any particular subject that we study, or any particular object. And I think humanity is a very overblown opinion of itself. So anything that kind of can decenter that experience and make it a wider appreciation of mystery, I guess. So mystery, and hence why I never trouble the charts, because it's just too weird. I don't know, weird things. And Harry, my dog, is very influential to me as well. Well, I truly say that. Again, it goes back to, because having lived with dogs most of my life, and sharing intimately a companionship with a different creature has a different perspective. It shows you that, the human perspective on the universe and the world is quite myopic and misses quite a lot. So exploring mystery, I guess.
Well, now, you become an author. You've got your second book coming out, The Life of Jonah. And I've read it's somewhat autobiographical.
The Trial of Jonah, actually.
Oh,
there you go. Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Look at my props. Look, here are my props, ladies and gentlemen, available from all good bookshops from Friday. Yeah, it is. I mean, so when I wrote, look at this, I got all loads of props. Like when I wrote The Tangle, which is my first novel, which is a kind of weird fiction, sort of eco horror, I guess, if you want a shorthand. But when I wrote that book, people were sort of saying, "Why don't you write your story? Your story of your life in music? That'd be really interesting to sort of have your perspective on the history of Acid House and your part in it." And I was like, it wouldn't be interesting at all. It would be the most boring book ever written, because I don't really have many great anecdotes that I'm willing to share with anyone anyway. And I'm always just sort of quite an early bath kind of guy these days. So all the stuff that happens in the after party, I always hear secondhand, bumping into people at airports. And I go, "Oh, what happened after I left?" Well, so my list of anecdotes is quite meager. So I thought, well, but there is an interesting story about falling in love with music and culture and its perspective, and what I was talking about before, where we as a species, or where I kind of as a member of that species fit in with it. So I thought, well, if I'm not going to write a straight autobiography, I'll just make it up. I'll make up the story of my life, and use bits of it that are true to weave this story of so basically on the surface of it is the trial of a time traveling criminal, cultural vampire, who is sent on a mission from God at an early age to experience life and to involve themselves in various forms of cultural skullduggery. So there's mugging, Mug Kandinsky and J.G. Ballard caused him to have a road crash. Possessed Mike Pickering and John Da Silva. But it's just a way of kind of telling a story about the magic of art and music, really, and our interaction with it. That's the basic. It's a vehicle for discussing those sort of things, I guess.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it, because just from what I've read, you know, I mean, a time traveler, yes.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, music, yes, yes, yes,
yeah.
yes. All the above. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Well, because time travel is something like, I know it's conceptually probably not possible, and like because when you're in an hour, you're in an hour, and you can't be back. But when you listen to a piece of music or read a book or look at a piece of art, you are transported, at least partially, maybe not physically, but you're transported elsewhere, and that might be somewhere in time, or to a different distant galaxy, or into a different culture that you've never been in before. You are transported in that sense. So yeah, it kind of it's a sort of metaphysical discussion about what happens when you engage with culture.
No,
So
I'm
time travel is definitely real.
well, music transports you. You know, you can
Mm,
listen to a track from 1980 and immediately, you know, your mind will go back to 1980. And usually, if you have a good memory, you can always like with me trainers, I know
yeah,
exactly where I was when I bought them. I know, and usually records, I'll be like, I know what shop I bought it from, what year it was. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of
yeah,
like reality time travel, you know, with it within your
yeah.
own mind. So yeah, I think it's brilliant that you've done that. And then, you know, your paintings, your visual art.
Mm.
I mean, you know, you seem to have it all together, even though it might not be that way in your own mind. I mean, you know,
Anything to avoid doing a hard day's work. No,
yeah,
it's. I mean, it's pretty tough. I mean, the thing about it is like it's brilliant. I absolutely love it. I mean, I find it really hard to relax. I don't have a lot of because I love working. I love making things. It's difficult though. It's difficult because culture is so freely available to everyone now. It's quite hard to make a living out of it. But everything together just about holds together, just about makes sense. And also I've never done anything else, so I'd be unemployable. Um, but I really love it, and I don't know. It's quite a privileged position to be in, even though it is tricky at times. But I really enjoy myself. I think it's really good fun, and the books are good fun as well. But even both the first one is quite dark. And quite horrifying in places. But even there's a kind of tongue in cheek. I find it really hard to take anything very seriously. That's my guide in life is don't take things too seriously, and I don't really. So I have a quite dark sense of humour, and I think a lot of the time people don't know if I'm joking or not. But generally, I am.
I mean that's British humor as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
You know,
gallows humour, especially in this day and age.
yeah, and I mean, especially like for me, Scousers, you just laugh at yourself, so nobody else can make a joke about you. You know, you do the jokes yourself, so you
Yeah,
know, it's like it's a hard skin, you know.
right.
So, but I also wanted, you know, before we go, I wanted to talk about Temple of the Worlds, your radio show on Soho.
Temple of Wonders.
Why am I getting these wrong today?
Yeah,
You
that's
must
fine.
you
That
transported me someplace else, and
I
I'm
have. I've transported you somewhere else. But again, I think that's totally fine. I remember like when pieces of art. Most of the art I do is quite abstract, and I often have this idea of what it is and what it represents in my head. But at times I've kind of put things up and explained it, and done a couple of art shows, and people come out. So what's this? And I start telling them, and they go, I think it's this. And you go, okay. So I think like you make something and then someone else can interpret it and call it what they want. That doesn't really matter to me. I think that's interesting, people's different interpretations, because once you've made something, whatever it is, radio show, art, books, you've lost control of it and it goes out into the universe, and it forms its own connections with people. And those connections might not be what you first intended, but they are genuine connections. So you can call the radio show whatever you like, really. I don't mind.
Well, I mean, again, like you said, art is whatever you think it is. You like the funny thing where the I don't know who did it, but put the banana on the wall,
Yeah.
with some masking tape, and people came up with these crazy ideas what it was, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
to me, it just looks like a banana on a wall, but
Yeah.
artists, they're trying to, do their perspective on life or whatever it is, and um, I'm all right with that, and I think everybody should be all right with that. Everybody has their own opinions. Some people in this world think their opinion matters more than others, and I
I
just
don't think anyone's opinion matters really, but I think that we're all just trying to make sense of this utter madness that we're thrown into, And I think even from the moment you're born to the moment that you die and join the great void and nothingness and the hereafter, you're just trying to make sense. You're just asking, why is this happening? What is it that's happening, and why is it happening? And art's just a way of trying to express that feeling. There's a quote by the French artist Adeline Redon, which is using the logic of the visible for the service of the invisible, and that's art to me. Really, it's just like trying to use these words, pictures, music to try and make sense of something that you can't quite grasp onto. So yeah, the banana on the wall. I always saw that called an accident waiting to happen. That's what I would call it.
and so many people have eaten those bananas as well.
Well, there you go.
You
Yeah.
know, as long as there's a plethora of bananas to refill those,
Yes.
that art can keep going.
Exactly.
I want to say, like, I've got a few things, your Stone Roses Waterfall remix is probably one of my favorites, just because I love Stone Roses. And, as you said, you try not to, like, better what they did, but you did it in a way that was Justin Robertson way, and it just, when I play that in the house. My kids love it. I have
Mm.
young girls, and they're all like, daddy's got
Yeah.
that Roses song on.
Right.
Like, well, it's not the original, and I play them the
Yeah.
original, and they love that too. But that's classic for me. And yesterday I actually got on Mixcloud and I
Mm.
listened to your it's the it was you and Andrew at the Boardwalk in 1992.
Oh wow.
I'm
Yeah.
still trying
Yeah.
to figure out who played first and who played second.
Yeah. I'm not sure. The 90s are a little bit hazy,
Yeah,
detail wise. I
because
think I know the recording you mean. I don't know. I'd have to hear.
Dave
I'd have to
Haslam
hear it.
played as well, and I think Pete Tong.
So in the city thing, I think, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But again, time traveling back to a time
Yeah. Yeah.
of my life that was just absolutely amazing. And then today, I put on your Glade set for Andrew, and it just, it, the man was, again, the word legend is banded about way too easily
Mm.
these days, but he was. And I also listened to the Scouse DJ Bernie Connor.
Oh, Bernie, love
Yeah,
Bernie.
he's coming on in March, and I can't wait to talk to him. And he had this little thing where he said he was DJing up in London, and Andrew was there, not DJing, but just
Mm.
messing with him and behind him in his ear, going,
Mm.
that's half a beat off, just to mess with him. And I think that's for people that knew him, knew Andrew,
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, that's him. You know, what, you know, and obviously it's been 5 years.
Mm.
What are your, you know, if you can put into words your thoughts on the man?
I mean, just one of my biggest inspirations, just his outlook, restless thirst for experience, whether that be books, art, or music. Just like a relentless enthusiast for artistic output, really. I mean, prodigious producer of music himself, and just like care and attention. After he passed away, I went up to his studio, and I was taking some photographs of his book collection for a project that's, you know, hopefully coming out soon, celebrating his life. And he had all his CDs of all the sets that he played, and they were all like every single set, from the most modest gig to the largest sort of warehouse, meticulously handwritten, handmade. The thought that went into every single thing he did, you know, the craftsmanship, the love, care, and attention was second to none, and that's why he was so brilliant to hear, you know, in everything he did, because it was always passionate and considered. And then talking of, you know, time travel, I mean, I really miss him. I really miss, like, we used to message each other about books. You know, just read something and he'd message, and I miss that a lot, and I miss not seeing him. But in some ways, he's still around. You know, in the time we talk about time travel, in some ways, his presence is ever present, because I can hear his voice, I can hear, and the inspiration continues. And the thing you often see on kind of different Facebook groups that celebrate his life is like "Be More Weatherall," and that's a very good guide for living, I think. If one had to take an ideal for living, that was not a bad one to have. Be more Weatherall, I say.
I love that. It's Justin, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Please, everyone, you can go to justinrobertson.co.uk. And as I always say, Bandcamp is a great place to go and check out all these DJs and producers and musicians I've had on, because they get most of the money, which, you know, they're the ones that create. They should get the money, but it's justinrobertson1.bandcamp.com. So please go check that out. Also, his brand new book will teleport you from the Roman era, I do believe,
Yeah.
all the way up until till now. So yeah, please go check that book out. As I always say, put your earbuds on, go listen to new music, go listen to new artists. You know, go to a gig that you've never heard of that person before. You know, because it's not always the superstar DJs, it's not always the big bands, you know, that have soul. Please go check them out. Again, Justin, thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank you,
thanks for
everyone,
having me.
for listening. Please like, subscribe, put your notifications on. Please stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.